Okay, let's talk about that time of year that sends football fans into a frenzy, really. You know the feeling, it's summer, the season's over, and suddenly every notification on your phone could be a potential game changer for your club. It's the transfer window.
That buzz is unmistakable, isn't it? It's a period defined by, well, constant speculation, surprising links, confirmed deals that just seem to come out of nowhere.
And those sagas.
Exactly, and those long, drawn-out sagas that dominate the headlines for weeks on end.
Right, and right now, we're smack in the middle of this first phase of the summer window where things are really starting to heat up. You know, clubs are laying the groundwork, bids are going in, targets are being identified.
It feels like the engines are just starting to properly rev up.
Precisely, which is why we're doing this deep dive today. You've given us a stack of source material, basically notes, pulled from a recent article in The Standard that gives us a snapshot of the transfer landscape right now.
Yeah, and it's packed, full of names, clubs, figures being thrown around, lots to unpack.
So our mission, as always in the deep dive, is to take that source material you've provided and, cut through the noise a bit. We're going to unpack the most significant points reported here.
The key rumors, the confirmed moves.
Exactly, the fascinating dynamics at play, and help you understand what this particular snapshot tells us about the summer transfer window as it stands. We're here to guide you through it.
Think of it as getting a clearer picture of the whole forest by examining, a specific group of trees very closely. This article gives us, I think, a valuable insight into the intentions and actions of several major clubs and players at this really crucial time.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Based on this source material, where's some of the biggest energy, the biggest buzz in the transfer market focused right now? We should probably start with some of the most high-profile names and developing sagas that feature prominently here.
Yeah, definitely. And topping the list for many, especially I'd imagine if you follow Arsenal, is the name Rodrygo, the Real Madrid star.
This one really leaped off the page, didn't it? The source reports that Arsenal apparently view Rodrygo as their, get this, priority target this summer. Priority. That's not a word clubs use lightly, is it? What does it really signify when a club actually names someone a priority target like that?
Well, it signals a really clear strategic objective. It's a strong statement. When a club identifies a player as their priority, it means they believe this specific individual is the most crucial piece missing from their squad, or maybe the player who can elevate them the most significantly.
Right.
It suggests they've done their homework, their analysis, decided this is the player they absolutely must try to get, and crucially, they're likely prepared to allocate a significant chunk of their transfer budget and, their negotiating efforts towards making that happen.
So it potentially puts other deals on the back burner.
It can, yeah. It might mean other recruitment efforts are paused, or at least the scale of other potential signings might be dictated by whether they succeed with this number one target. It sets the tone.
And here's where the complexity, the classic transfer window complexity, immediately pops up in the source material. There's a significant counterpoint right there. Xabi Alonso, just appointed as the new Real Madrid manager, was explicitly quoted at his unveiling. And he stated pretty unequivocally that Rodrygo is a spectacular player and we need him.
Yeah, that quote jumps out too. It creates a fascinating dynamic, doesn't it? You've got Arsenal, according to this report, signaling maximum intent by labeling Rodrygo their top target.
Their priority.
And almost simultaneously, the manager of the club that owns the player is publicly stating, very clearly, he's needed, he's part of my plans. This isn't just guesswork, it's a direct clash. A clash between the reported ambition of a buying club and the stated position of the selling club's new leadership.
So, okay, given Xabi Alonso's very public declaration, how realistic is it for Arsenal to actually land their priority target? Does a manager saying we need him effectively just, shut down negotiations before they even properly begin?
It certainly makes it significantly harder. Significantly. I mean, Real Madrid aren't exactly a club under financial pressure to sell key players, are they?
Oh, not at all.
So if their new manager, who's just coming in trying to establish his vision, build his team, says he views Rodrygo as integral, well, that sends a very strong message, both internally at Madrid and externally to clubs like Arsenal.
So it sets their stall out.
Precisely. Yeah. It suggests Real Madrid's default position is going to be not for sale. For Arsenal, this means any approach would likely need to be, extraordinary, an absolutely massive offer, perhaps well above what might be considered his market value, just to even tempt Real Madrid into thinking about it.
Or maybe Arsenal's stance was decided before Alonso spoke.
That's possible too. Maybe Arsenal's priority status for Rodrygo was established before Alonso's public comments, and now they might have to quickly, pivot to their next target if Real Madrid truly won't budge. It just highlights how volatile priorities can be in the window as circumstances shift day by day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A public statement like that carries strategic weight, doesn't it? Okay, moving from a potential big-name arrival to a developing saga that seems to span continents. The source also digs into Victor Osimhen.
Yes, the Napoli striker. The source references a report from Fabrizio Romano stating that Al Hilal from the Saudi Pro League made an official bid for the Nigeria international.
And it mentions he had a good season too, including some time on loan at Galatasaray, right?
That's right. The source notes that loan spell, adds context to his recent form.
And the bid details provided here are quite specific. $65 million, which is about $54 million, plus another $5 million, or $4.2 million in add-ons. That's a significant amount of money being put on the table.
It absolutely is, and it really reinforces what we've seen developing over the last year or so, doesn't it? The growing influence and, frankly, the financial power of clubs in Saudi Arabia. They clearly have the resources, and they're showing the willingness to invest really substantial fees to attract top-tier talent, or players like Osimhen who've proven themselves at a high level in Europe.
But Napoli's response, according to Sky Sports, which is cited in this source material, was pretty swift and firm. They rejected Al Hilal's opening offer.
Yeah, a flat rejection.
Not just rejected, though.
No. Crucially, Napoli's stance wasn't just a simple no. The source reports that Napoli basically told Al Hilal to pay Osimhen's release clause.
Ah, the release clause. Okay, maybe just quickly for listeners who might not be deep in the transfer jargon, what exactly is a release clause in this context?
Good point. Yeah, a release clause, sometimes called a buyout clause, it's essentially a specific amount of money written directly into a player's contract.
Okay.
If a club comes in and makes an offer that meets or goes above this agreed upon figure, then the selling club is contractually obligated. They have to allow the buying club to talk to the player, to negotiate personal terms.
So it kind of bypasses the usual haggling over the fee.
Exactly. It bypasses that traditional back and forth negotiation over the transfer fee itself. Though, importantly, you still have to agree personal terms with the player and their agent, which isn't always straightforward.
Got it. So Napoli is basically saying, look, don't offer us less. Just meet the number we've already agreed is his value in his contract. And that release clause is stated here as being around £63 million.
Precisely. So you compare Al Hilal's rejected bid, 54 meters plus add-ons. Compare that to the reported 63-meter release clause, and you can see Napoli's message clearly. They're saying, our valuation is set by the contract. If you want him, you need to pay that figure, or at least get very, very close to it in guaranteed money, not just potential add-ons.
It shows a strong negotiating position from Napoli.
Definitely. They're clearly not desperate to sell for below their own valuation. They hold the cards to some extent.
So why might they hold out so firmly for the full clause amount? Is it purely about getting maximum value, or is there more to it strategically?
It's likely a mix of things. Firstly, yes, it formalizes the club's internal valuation of the player, makes it clear. Secondly, it sets a really high bar for potential suitors, doesn't it? It might deter clubs who aren't willing or able to pay that top market price.
Filters them out?
Kind of, yeah.
Yep.
Thirdly, if Osimhen is a key player for them, demanding the release clause means they only lose him if someone pays a premium price, a price that gives them significant funds to go out and find a suitable replacement, which isn't easy.
Makes sense.
And it also signals strength to other clubs in the market. We don't get pushed around on price. So, as the source suggests, rejecting that initial offer and pointing straight to the clause,
For what?
well, it really does feel like the start of what could become a lengthy saga.
Another summer saga.
Exactly. As Al Hilal now has to decide whether to up their offer significantly towards that 63-meter figure or maybe walk away.
We see those unfold every summer, don't we? Right, shifting gears now, let's talk about a potential move within the Premier League that's grabbing headlines according to this source. Mohamed Kudus, currently at West Ham, with reported interest from Chelsea.
Yes, Kudus. Chelsea have reportedly had him on their radar for some time, according to the source. And it says they recently made an approach to West Ham.
The article is careful to clarify this wasn't an official bid, though. More like informal talks, an inquiry where West Ham basically indicated he would not come cheap.
Which, let's be honest, given Kudus' quality, his impact for West Ham last season, that's hardly surprising, is it? He's a dynamic, exciting, attacking player.
Absolutely.
But what's particularly significant about Kudus' situation, and this is highlighted quite clearly in your source material, is a very specific contract detail. Kudus reportedly has a $100 million, that's $85 million release clause. But, and this is key, it's specifically for Premier League clubs.
Wow, okay, that's specific. And even more intriguing, there's a timing element. This clause is apparently only active for a very limited time, the first 10 days of July.
That timing is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? It creates a very specific strategic challenge and opportunity for both clubs involved.
How so?
Well, for West Ham, it means their valuation for domestic rivals is publicly set at 85 meters, but only for that short 10-day window. They risk losing a key player if that substantial figure is met within those specific days.
But outside that window?
Outside that window, they regain much more control. They have much more flexibility in negotiations. They could potentially demand even more than 85 meters or simply refuse to sell altogether if they choose.
And for Chelsea?
For Chelsea, the fact that they made that informal approach, which was knocked back, well, it might indicate they're now seriously weighing up whether to just trigger that massive 85-meter clause before the July 10th deadline expires. It forces a decision.
That 85 million figure is enormous, especially for a release clause within the same league. It really underscores West Ham's high valuation of Kudus and just the premium price attached to proven, exciting, attacking talent within the Premier League market these days.
It really does. And as you mentioned, Chelsea are reportedly busy elsewhere too, particularly looking at other forwards. So this Kudus link definitely connects to their broader recruitment strategy, which is detailed quite a bit in this source material.
Okay, let's transition then. Let's focus specifically on the reported activity within several major Premier League clubs mentioned frequently in this source. There's a lot going on.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start? Manchester United.
Yeah, let's start with Manchester United and their reported search for a new striker. The source says they've made their move for Victor Gyökeres.
Yes, identifying him as a key target to, bolster their attack. United's need for a reliable goal scorer has been pretty well documented, hasn't it? And Gyökeres, after what the source describes as 2 sensational seasons with Sporting CP, well, he's certainly proven he can find the back of the net consistently at a high level.
But interestingly, the source also notes that this isn't the only striker they seem to be looking at. It mentions they've reportedly seen an opening bid for Bryan Mbeumo, rejected by Brentford. What does that tell us about United's approach here?
Well, it strongly suggests they're working on multiple fronts for that striker position, doesn't it? While Gyökeres might be, say, a primary target, having a bid rejected for Mbeumo indicates they have a list of alternatives and they're actively exploring them simultaneously.
Standard practice, really.
Pretty much, yeah. It's standard practice in transfers. You rarely want to put all your eggs in one basket, especially for a position as crucial and, frankly, expensive as a central striker.
And are Gyökeres and Mbeumo similar types of players?
Not entirely. They offer somewhat different profiles, which suggests United might be open to slightly varied options depending on who becomes available and, importantly, at what cost.
Now, there's a fascinating detail regarding Gyökeres specifically mentioned in the source, the player's reported stance. He is apparently open to a reunion with Ruben Amorim. And the article links Amorim to Manchester United, implying he could be the incoming manager, though it doesn't explicitly confirm it.
Right. That potential reunion is a really significant factor, potentially. Players often thrive under managers they have a good relationship with, whose system they understand and fit into well.
Makes sense.
So if Amorim is indeed heading to Old Trafford, as the source implies in this context, and Gyökeres is genuinely open to working with him again, well, that could really smooth the personal terms negotiation. It could make the move much more appealing to the player himself.
And there's another crucial point mentioned.
Yes, the Champions League factor. Crucially, the source notes Gyökeres is reportedly willing to join without Champions League football next season. That could be a major hurdle for many other top players considering a move to United right now.
So the Amorim connection might override that.
It could. His desire to reunite with a manager who clearly got the absolute best out of him at Sporting could potentially override the lack of Europe's top competition, at least for a season.
Interesting. Now, the price tag mentioned for Gyökeres is $60 million, according to Sporting's asking price reported here. So United are navigating whether to meet that price for a player seemingly open to the move and that potential reunion.
Or pursue alternatives like Mbeumo, where they've already hit a roadblock with Brentford rejecting their first bid.
It certainly highlights the urgent need for, well, firepower at Old Trafford this summer, based on this activity.
Definitely. Okay, moving slightly north then, Liverpool's ambitions for the window are also detailed quite extensively in this source. It mentions they are hopeful, apparently, of clinching a potentially club record deal for Florian Wirtz soon,
Wow.
and that this comes after offering him a massive contract.
Club record deal is a huge statement, isn't it? It immediately tells you the scale of Liverpool's ambition here and the kind of financial outlay they are reportedly considering for Wirtz. This isn't just a squad filler. It's potentially a transformative signing for their squad, especially under new leadership.
Yeah, it signals real intent. And the source also points to a bit of a pattern here involving players from Bayer Leverkusen.
Yes, you mentioned Frimpong earlier.
Exactly. Jeremy Frimpong has reportedly already made the move from Leverkusen to Liverpool, and according to this article, Wirtz is expected to follow him.
Is that just a coincidence? Two key players from the German champions? Or does it suggest something more deliberate, like a specific strategy targeting players from Leverkusen? Maybe they fit a certain tactical profile Arne Slot wants, or perhaps there are good relationships between the clubs or agents that make these deals easier.
It could well be a combination of those things. I mean, managers and recruitment teams often identify specific leagues or even specific clubs whose players they believe would adapt well to their system or just the general intensity of the Premier League.
And Leverkusen had an incredible season.
An exceptional, unbeaten, title-winning season. So scouting their key players makes perfect sense. Securing two prominent players from the same highly successful team within one window, well, it might indicate a belief that those players can replicate their understanding and form together in a new environment. Or, as you say, maybe it just leverages existing connections to get deals done.
It's not just Leverkusen players, is it?
No. The source also notes Liverpool are reportedly closing in on Milos Kerkez at Bournemouth as well, indicating activity beyond just those big German targets. They're looking domestically, too.
And while they're targeting these potentially huge incomings, the source also reveals Liverpool are focused on keeping who they've got. It mentions they snubbed Barcelona's approach for Luis Diaz.
Yeah, that's quite telling, isn't it? Amidst pursuing potentially club record signings like Wirtz, they're clearly prioritizing keeping their own key attacking players like Diaz.
So, not a total overhaul of the attack.
It suggests not. It signals they aren't looking to significantly reshuffle their attacking options beyond adding top talent like Wirtz. They seem to want to build on what they already have while strengthening it further. And, frankly, snubbing a club like Barcelona for a player like Diaz shows confidence in their current squad and their overall project going forward.
Right. Okay, switching back down to London, Chelsea, according to the source material, seem to be having an incredibly busy window already, or at least planning one.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it.
Beyond that Mohamed Kudus approach we discussed earlier, they are reportedly negotiating a deal for another high-profile striker target.
Yes, and this is a recurring theme for Chelsea in this article, a clear, strong focus on strengthening their attack, and not just with one player either. The source indicates they are also reportedly out in front in the battle to sign Hugo Ekitike.
He's been linked with quite a few clubs over the last year or two, hasn't he? Being out in front suggests they are, well, leading the race for his signature among whoever else might be interested.
It implies they're in pole position, yeah. And add to that, the source mentions they're also trying to wrap up signings for Jamie Gittins and Mike Maignan.
Maignan, the goalkeeper.
That's right, the AC Milan keeper.
Okay, so let's tally that up just from this one source. Kudus approach, Ekitike apparently leading the race. Another unnamed high-profile striker target being negotiated, Jamie Gittins, Mike Maignan. Plus the confirmed arrival of Liam Delap mentioned here from Ipswich.
Yeah.
That is a significant volume of reported activity across different positions. The forward line is getting a lot of attention, potentially a top goalkeeper, and other attacking areas with Gittins.
It paints a picture of a club undergoing, or at least attempting, a pretty considerable squad overhaul, doesn't it? The emphasis on multiple attacking targets. Kudus, Ekitike, the unnamed striker, Gittins clearly identifies where they see the most pressing need for improvement.
No question about that.
And the potential move for Maignan also suggests they might be looking to make a big change or upgrade in the goalkeeper position as well.
It's a real mix, isn't it? Pursuing high-value, potentially first-team ready players alongside bringing in younger talent with potential like Delap. The sheer number of names linked just to Chelsea in this single source really underscores their ambition and, well, the amount of work their recruitment team seems to be doing right now.
It's a lot to track. Okay, back to Arsenal for a moment. Beyond the ambitious Rodrygo link and that informal Kudus approach, this source details some other interesting aspects of the reported transfer activity.
Yeah, one point that might raise a few eyebrows for some is the reported interest in Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga.
Right. According to reports from Italy cited in this source, Arsenal are considering a deal for Kepa. He spent last season on loan, didn't he, at Bournemouth?
That's right, and the report includes a very, very eye-catching detail. He's apparently available for just £5 million due to a release clause in his contract. $5 million. That seems incredibly low for a goalkeeper, with his level of experience, even considering, his history at Chelsea and the recent loan spell.
It is incredibly low, and this is where understanding the context provided by the source is really key. Arsenal's current backup keeper, Nato, has just returned to Bournemouth after his loan spell ended.
Oh, okay.
So Arsenal have been linked with various keepers recently, seemingly to provide competition or reliable backup for David Raya, who is clearly the established number one now.
So Kepa wouldn't be coming to challenge Raya directly?
At that price. Probably not initially. A £5 release clause makes Kepa a potentially very cheap, low-risk option financially to fill that backup role, or at least provide experienced depth behind Raya. It makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah, financially it seems like a no-brainer if they need cover. It just highlights again how release clauses, especially surprisingly low ones, can suddenly open up unexpected possibilities in the market.
Definitely. And beyond the goalkeeper situation, Arsenal are also linked to other forwards in this source. Names like Morgan Rogers and Igor Paixão are mentioned.
Which reinforces what we've seen with other clubs, right? They aren't necessarily fixated on just one target, even if Rodrygo is the reported priority. They're clearly exploring other options for strengthening their attack, perhaps at different price points or with slightly different player profiles compared to Rodrygo.
Exactly. And they also look set to sign Konstantinos Karatsas, who is mentioned here. That's another example of recruiting younger talent alongside the pursuit of maybe more established marquee or first-team players.
It shows that a multi-layered nature of recruitment, doesn't it? From potentially transformative signings like Rodrygo to experienced depth options like Kepa, possibly, and then future prospects like Karatsas. It's all happening concurrently, according to this snapshot anyway.
A busy time for their recruitment team, too, it seems.
Okay, let's move now to some of the other notable reports and specific player movements mentioned in this source. They provide some further context to this early transfer window activity.
Right. First up, there's a decision reported regarding a highly rated young player, Franco Mastantuono, described in the source as a River Plate wonder kid.
Yeah, wonder kid. And the source lists interest from several huge European clubs. Manchester United, Chelsea, and Paris Saint-Germain were all apparently keen. That kind of competition alone speaks volumes about his potential and his reputation already.
Absolutely. But according to Fabrizio Romano, as reported in this article, he has reportedly chosen his destination. He's picked Real Madrid.
There they are again, Real Madrid. This feels like another example of their strategy, doesn't it? Something we touched on with Rodrygo. They aren't just buying established superstars. They seem consistently successful in identifying and then securing the most coveted young talents from around the world.
And often beating out significant competition from other very wealthy clubs in the process.
Yeah. It really underscores their long-term vision, maybe their planning, and also their sheer appeal to the next generation of potential stars.
Definitely a pattern there. Okay, next, an interesting situation involving a prominent manager moving clubs. The source reports that Erik ten Hag is back in management already, taking over at Bayer Leverkusen.
A quick return to the dugout for him after leaving Manchester United not too long ago.
Very quick. But the source immediately notes that his job there is potentially made harder right from the outset. Why? Because two key players have either already left or are expected to leave very soon.
Linking back to the Liverpool section.
Exactly. As we discussed earlier, Jeremy Frimpong has reportedly already joined Liverpool, and the star player Florian Wirtz is widely expected to follow him there, according to this source.
Ouch. So Ten Hag inherits this incredibly successful title-winning squad, but is immediately facing the prospect of losing two of its most impactful players, arguably the two most impactful, to a Premier League rival. That's a significant challenge for any new manager walking in the door.
Huge challenge. And here's an intriguing link in the report that connects right back to his previous club, Manchester United. Reports claim, according to the source, that if Wirtz does depart as expected, Ten Hag is considering Manchester United winger Antony as a potential replacement.
Antony.
Okay.
Who the source also happens to report doesn't really have a future at Old Trafford, and United are apparently open to a permanent deal for him. And it notes he's coming off an impressive loan spell with Real Betis.
Right. So this is a classic piece of transfer speculation that, based purely on the information provided in the source, actually makes quite a bit of logical sense, doesn't it?
It kind of lines up.
Yeah. A manager joins a new club, needs to fill a specific profile left by a departing star player, Wirtz, and there's a player he previously managed at Ajax and United, knows extremely well, who is reportedly available, and who is coming off a good loan spell elsewhere.
The dots connect, on paper at least.
Exactly. Antony's situation at United and his reported successful loan make this link plausible. It shows how managerial moves can directly influence potential player movements, sometimes bringing former colleagues back together in new surroundings.
Yeah, interesting one to watch. Okay, another player whose club is publicly trying to keep hold of him, according to this source, is Nico Williams, currently at Athletic Club in Bilbao and linked here with both Arsenal and Chelsea.
That's right, and Athletic Club's president, John Uriarte, has apparently commented directly on Williams' future. The source quotes him stating that Williams is very much part of the project at the club.
Standard line.
Pretty standard, yeah. And that the project becomes easier if we keep our players. He also apparently believes Nico has a very exciting year ahead at Athletic Club.
Right. So how much weight should we, or maybe the buying clubs, put on public comments like this from club presidents or managers? Are they genuinely saying hands off, or is it more of a strategic move, maybe to drive up the price or just deter suitors a bit?
Honestly, it's almost always a bit of both, but probably leaning more towards being a strategic move in this kind of context. A president or manager very rarely comes out and says a key player is definitely available unless, a deal is practically done.
Right.
So publicly stating that a player is integral to the club's plans serves multiple purposes. It reassures their own fan base, which is important. It signals to the player themselves that they are valued. But most importantly, perhaps, it tells potential buying clubs loud and clear. This player is not for sale cheaply, if he's for sale at all.
Strengthens their negotiating position.
Immensely. It makes signing players who are absolutely central to their current club's project, like Williams clearly is for Athletic Club, particularly difficult. Unless, of course, there's a release clause that gets met, though the source doesn't actually mention one for Williams here, or an offer comes in that is simply irresistible for the club.
Makes sense. Okay, turning to Manchester City now. A club often known for being quite discreet about their transfer business until things are pretty much finalized. But this source does mention some potential upcoming arrivals for them.
Yes, it does. The article lists 3 names: Rayan Aït-Nouri, Tijani Reinders, and Ryan Cherki. And it states quite confidently that City looks set to welcome these players.
And there's a timing element mentioned too. It says this is happening ahead of the Club World Cup and that medicals were reportedly booked for this weekend just past.
Yeah, this points towards that less public but seemingly highly efficient recruitment strategy that City often employs, as reported here anyway. They aren't really featuring in these prolonged public sagas in this particular snapshot, like the Osimhen situation, or even the multi-club links like Mastantuono.
Or under the radar.
Exactly. Instead, they appear to be quietly securing their targets, perhaps with specific deadlines in mind, like preparing for that Club World Cup tournament mentioned here. It's definitely a contrast to some of the more public, maybe more drawn-out negotiations we've discussed for other clubs.
Different approaches. Okay, finally, let's move away from the rumors and potential signings to a confirmed departure mentioned in the source. Kieran Tierney leaving Arsenal.
Yes, this is confirmed news from just before this article was compiled, it seems. Tierney is set to leave Arsenal when his contract expires at the end of this month. He arrived, you might remember, from Celtic back in 2019. It felt like a significant signing at the time.
Yeah, he was very popular initially.
He was, yeah. Initially a key player and a real fan favorite. The article notes, though, that his departure wasn't solely down to, say, a dip in performance, but more a combination of factors, including persistent injuries, unfortunately for him, and also a new tactical setup under the manager, which eventually led to him being phased out of the regular starting 11.
Which is a very common story in football, sadly.
It is. A very common and often quite sad part of football careers. You get a talented player arrive, they make a big impact, build a real connection with the fans. But then circumstances, like those injuries or the team's tactical evolution, just mean they no longer fit into the manager's long-term plans as a regular starter.
It mentions he had a sort of farewell season.
Yeah, the source mentions he apparently enjoyed a farewell season, suggesting he remained a positive influence around the squad, stayed part of things, and even scored on his final appearance, which is always a nice touch for a departing player.
And the source includes some key quotes from Tierney's own thank you message to the Arsenal fans upon his departure being confirmed.
That's right. He expresses gratitude for their support and specifically highlights their backing, especially in hard times, which presumably refers to his injury struggles. He says he felt lucky to have played for this club, thanked them for the support he received, stated he loved every day, and felt he was always learning and improving during his time there.
Including the player's personal message like that, it adds a really important human dimension to the whole transfer market discussion, doesn't it?
It really does. It reminds us that behind all the huge fees, the complex contract clauses, and the club strategies, there are individuals. Individuals with their own relationships to the club, to the fans, and to the sport itself.
Yeah.
Tierney's message, thanking supporters for helping him through difficult periods like injury and expressing genuine affection for his time at the club despite the ultimate footballing outcome not being a long-term starting role. It just offers a different, valuable perspective. It's not always just about the excitement of new arrivals. It's also important to acknowledge the journeys of players who move on and the personal connections they form along the way.
Well said. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground from this single snapshot provided in your source material. Let's just take a moment to step back and maybe connect some of these individual points, try and get a broader picture. What does this specific article, this snapshot, tell us about the state of the summer transfer window right now as things stand?
Well, it tells us several things quite clearly, I think. Firstly, it's incredibly active. Even in these relatively early stages, we're seeing major clubs across Europe, and as we saw with Al Hilal, beyond Europe too, making significant moves or attempting to.
Definitely busy.
Secondly, big money is definitely being discussed and, in some cases, put on the table already. High valuations, potentially club record deals being pursued. The financial scale is evident. Thirdly, release clauses are playing a really crucial role, setting prices, influencing strategies, sometimes creating these very specific limited windows of opportunity, like with Kudus.
Yeah, the timing aspect is key.
Fourthly, there seems to be a really clear focus on reinforcing attacking positions among many of the top Premier League clubs mentioned here. That's a recurring theme. And finally, it's a real mix, isn't it? Targeting established high-value players, but also looking at high-potential younger talents and securing future prospects lower down the chain, too. It's happening on multiple levels.
And what about the clubs themselves? What do the reported targets mentioned in this source tell us about the perceived needs and the strategic plans of these specific clubs based on this info?
Well, Chelsea's reported pursuit of multiple forwards, Kudus, Ekitik, that other unnamed striker, it just screams that they see their primary weakness in attack, and they are addressing it aggressively and seemingly on multiple fronts, not putting all their eggs in one basket there.
Right.
Manchester United's clear focus on Gyökeres and the attempt from Mbeumo clearly indicates their priority is getting a central striker in. Arsenal's stated priority target in Rodrygo shows, well, lofty ambition, doesn't it? But their concurrent links to a potentially low-cost keeper option like Kepa and other forwards suggest maybe a more pragmatic, multi-tiered recruitment approach overall.
Covering different bases.
Exactly. And Liverpool's swing for that potentially club record deal with Wirtz signals a real desire for a high-impact signing, someone to perhaps really elevate their midfield or attack under the new leadership, while also, importantly, prioritizing retention of key players they already have, like Luis Diaz.
We also definitely see the global nature of the market reflected here, don't we? You've got the increasing financial power of Saudi clubs like Al Hilal challenging established European giants for players like Osimhen. And then you've got the traditional European powerhouses like Real Madrid continuing to seemingly dominate the race for the very elite young talents like Mastantuono.
Absolutely. It's a really complex ecosystem, isn't it? Involving clubs from completely different leagues with different financial models, managers trying to shape their squads quickly like Ten Hag potentially needing to replace key departures at Leverkusen, and players navigating their own careers amidst all this interest and speculation.
So, stepping back from the specific names and numbers for just a moment, why is following these reports, digging into sources like this one you've shared with us, actually valuable for you, the listener? Why should you care about these specific rumors and reported moves?
That's a great question. Because it's genuinely more than just, idle gossip or filling column inches. Following this stuff closely provides real insight into the strategic thinking happening at the very highest levels of football clubs.
How they operate.
Exactly. It shows you how teams are actually built and rebuilt in the modern game. It reveals the enormous financial scale of the sport, the valuations that get thrown around, the intricate negotiations, the sometimes surprising impact of clauses and contract timings.
And the decisions managers make.
Yeah, it reveals the strategic decisions managers and sporting directors are forced to make, often under immense pressure. And maybe just as importantly, as we saw with the Kieran Tierney message, it gives you glimpses into the human stories behind the headlines.
The personal side.
The player's personal journey, their relationship with the club and the fans, the impact of things like injuries or tactical changes on their career path. It really is the engine that powers the sport in many ways. Understanding the transfer market is pretty fundamental to understanding modern football's dynamics, its ambitions, its pressures, and its challenges.
It really does bring it all together when you look at it like that, doesn't it? We've journeyed through quite a bit just from this one source. The high-stakes potential moves like Rodrygo versus Real Madrid's public stance, Al Hilal's rejected Osimhen bid being met with Napoli's firm demand for the release clause, Chelsea's multi-pronged approach, including that very specific time-limited 85-meter Kudus clause. We've looked at Manchester United's search for strikers with Gyökeres and Mbeumo, Liverpool's ambitious push for Wirtz alongside retaining Diaz, Chelsea's incredibly high volume of reported activity across multiple positions, and Arsenal's varied links, from a potential priority target like Rodrygo down to a 5-meter keeper option in Kepa.
Plus, we saw the race for young talent with Mastantuono reportedly picking Real Madrid, Erik ten Hag potentially linking up with Antony again at Leverkusen, Nico Williams, club president, publicly backing him and stating his importance, Manchester City's apparent quiet efficiency in securing arrivals.
And that personal confirmed story of Kieran Tierney's departure and his message to the fans.
We've really tried to take the specific details reported in this source material and unpack what they might mean for you, the listener, hopefully giving you a clearer picture of the early transfer window buzz that it captures.
And by looking closely at a single snapshot like this, you really do get a sense of the complexity involved, the different strategies at play between clubs, and just the sheer volume of interconnected possibilities and decisions happening behind the scenes across multiple clubs all at the same time.
Absolutely. It's a whirlwind. And, given the mix of reports we've discussed today, the rejected bids flying around, the managers making very public statements about players, the specific timing of certain release clauses, the sometimes very open willingness of players to move, it does leave you with an interesting thought to consider as the window progresses, doesn't it? Well, how much of what we read and hear reported in the transfer window is a truly concrete reflection of what's genuinely happening behind closed doors? And how much of it might actually be, strategic noise? Noise designed perhaps to influence negotiations or manage public perception, maybe even distract from other activities the club is pursuing more quietly. It's a question that definitely adds another layer to following every incoming and outgoing rumor throughout the summer.